never liked Spider-Man! Look, I get why so many people like the concept of this character, but there has just been so much crap inflicted on Spider-Man through the years that I just can't find it entertaining. The whole basis is practically built around Peter Parker having to be eternally miserable, hated by most people, and everyone who does like him ultimately doomed to die because of him, all because of something that he never intended to happen to him. One of the worst examples may have actually been the animated series from the 1990s, where the last season ended with him losing Mary Jane, and the rest of the season having to deal with that bitch Madam Web telling him to just get over it because it's his destiny to be a hero. I didn't think it could get any worse in any Spider-Man series than that, but yeah. So, seeing just how much the character has been screwed over 600 ways from Sunday since the Clinton administration, a TV series from the 1970s couldn't be that much worse, could it? Yes, kids, believe it or not, there was a live-action Spider-Man TV series before any of the other Marvel TV productions of the time. Released on CBS just 2 months before the Incredible Hulk series debuted. Personally, I'm actually very curious to see just how in the world they could pull this off. Remember, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films required so much special effects work, the second and third films blew past Titanic to become the most expensive Hollywood films at the time. How in the frack could they have possibly made a series about a guy who swings across buildings on a spider web with a 1970s TV budget? Well, let's see how they tried as we look at the 1970s live-action series, The Amazing Spider-Man. Our pilot episode begins with this doctor just walking out of a patient exam once the clock strikes 10:45, and then this lawyer walks out of court 15 minutes later. What, do they each have the same tea time to meet? Well, no, because then both guys pull up together in front of a bank, it looks like. Pull a bunch of stuff out of the glove compartment because they apparently stole this car from the BBC's doctor. Then commit a burglary in broad daylight and almost kill themselves in the slowest car collision ever before 2 other guys show up and make off with the money they stole. See, this is why I don't complain about what the crime rate is today. It was clearly far worse back then. We then cut to the offices of the Daily Bugle just before it got bought up by the Daily Planet. Seriously, this looks like the same set that was used in the Superman movie. And we're introduced to this version of Peter Parker and J. Jonah Jameson, the latter of whom is played by David White, aka Darren's boss Larry Tate from Bewitched. That son of a gun!
One of the most bizarre crimes in the history of the city now appears to be unfolding. The mayor has received an extortion note in which the lives of 10 New Yorkers have been threatened.
Well, it'll sell papers, all right. But write it straight. Quote the mayor, if you'll get hold of him.
Okay. Well, sir, would you like me to go and take a picture of it?
Never mind, never mind. We've got enough pictures of the mayor to wallpaper the building.
We then cut to science class, where Peter and his buddy are performing science. But of course, guess what got trapped in with their experiment?
I'm gonna get this checked. How much more you got to do?
I just have to test a couple of transistor circuits.
Okay, that explains how the spider got out, but how did it get in again? This looks like a lawsuit waiting to happen. So we all know what happens next. The spider bites Peter and, you know what? How come in no version do we ever hear of what happens to that spider afterward? Did the one bite just freaking kill it like with a bee sting? Otherwise, you mean it never got another opportunity to bite someone else, leading to a whole bunch of Spider-Men around the city? This happens just as another one of these suicide robberies is taking place, and that effect a 6. I'd still take the rope climbing scenes from the Batman series. Naturally, because Peter is a smart one, he immediately realizes it had to have been the spider bite that caused this. Wouldn't it be great if someday there's a version where it's revealed it wasn't the bite, and Peter was just born a freak that developed the powers naturally? On second thought, then he'd just become one of the X-Men, and I've never been a big fan of that series either. We get a bunch of bad green screen effects as Peter decides to climb all over his home in broad daylight, and of course Aunt May never ends up seeing any of this. And yes, Aunt May is in this series, as we'll see later. That actually surprised me. This leads to him climbing city building walls in broad daylight, and just wait for criminals to show up, where he's able to stop them by just making them freeze right in their tracks while he slowly climbs back down, giving the police time to show up. Jeez, I could have gone to the kitchen for more Cokes in the time he takes. You can probably guess what this leads to. Jameson wants pictures of this Spider-Man, though amazingly, we don't get him calling him a menace, at least not at the outset. And at long last, we get to see Peter Parker in his Spider-Man costume. So, Peter dons his brand new Halloween costume in order to pose for the pictures to try and finally get the job with Jameson, and it's at this point that we really see just how mediocre the casting is. I feel David White is trying his best to be the curmudgeon Jameson is supposed to be, but he just comes off more as exasperated than a loudmouth bully.
You sure these are genuine?
Oh, come on, JJ. Get a guy a break, will you? He said he just happened to catch this Spider-Man in action. And he's always got his camera with him, hasn't he?
Look, he's been trying to get $46 out of me for 2 days. Maybe this is fake. How do I know? Maybe he made the whole thing up.
I know I'm looking at it through the lens of having seen him played by Ed Asner and J.K. Simmons, but this cop character played by Michael Pataki does a better job of being the grouch Jameson is meant to be. He even has the cigar down pat.
Would I be unreasonable if I were to say that you're starting to worry me?
Well, I guess I can see your point of view.
Can you now?
I mean, I do somehow manage to keep showing up at these things.
Why would this cop be suspicious that someone from the press shows up at a major crime scene? This is New York City, not Hooterville. Now, Peter using his spider strength to separate a guy from a pinned-in steering wheel when no one else is watching, but is still the only one there when the medics discover it? That's suspicious, but no one even considers it. We're only a third of the way into this pilot, people, so I'm gonna try and speed things up. After Peter finally does something heroic as Spider-Man in saving the latest thief from committing suicide, he agrees to help the guy's daughter find out just what he might have been involved in with this self-help guru, who of course is the villain, because Norman Osborn, who's that? And no, the daughter is clearly not Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy, so I'm not even bothering to learn her actual name. At least we do see Peter finally make the web shooters about halfway through. Yeah, I was worried that might get left out as well. Turns out, sure enough, the self-help guy has been using his sessions to brainwash his customers into committing crimes for him, and then force them to attempt mass suicide in order to extort millions from the city. And people say shows today are dark and nihilistic. Oh, and he also has ninjas for bodyguards, because of course he does. And then Peter falls right into the guy's plans, because just because you're a science dork doesn't mean you're a smart guy. And the only reason he doesn't complete his orders to jump off the Empire State Building is the lapel pin that was transmitting the signal to his brain comes off. So, if any of these guys had just taken that pen off to get their jackets dry cleaned and never put it back on, this entire plan would have failed. Self-help guys should have been thankful it wasn't a hot summer in New York. Doesn't matter, because Peter shuts down the Guru's signal by literally tearing down the transmitter with webbing, and this somehow causes the signal to relay back to him. I'm pretty sure microwaves don't work that way.
That character in the clown suit, he worked out pretty good.
That freak. He ought to be locked up, running around like a one-man army. I don't know where he came from, but I sure hope he goes back there.
Well, there's kind of the Jameson we know. Again, he's trying, though apparently not trying hard enough because he was replaced by Robert F. Simon for the rest of the series. Now he knows how Dick York must have felt. I should point out that this is another case where I couldn't get very many episodes of this particular show. But there is one specific other episode I definitely need to bring up, and that would be the fourth one, where Spider-Man has to fight an evil clone of himself. Because, you know, Spider-Man and cloning always works out, right? It shouldn't be surprised that pretty much none of the well-known Spider-Man villains from the comics ever actually appear in this show. Really, why was Batman the only TV superhero adaptation of this time that got that right? Other than that, it looks like quite a few episodes, especially the early ones, get a bit political. Like Spidey either having to stop terrorists from setting off a nuclear bomb and having to rescue a Latin American princess who's kidnapped by fascists. Am I watching Spider-Man or 24 circa the 1970s? Despite Stan Lee himself not liking the show, calling it too juvenile, it actually drew decent ratings. So of course network politics stepped in and killed it. Much like they did with all the backwoods-themed sitcoms of the previous decade, the brass at CBS suddenly decided they didn't want to be known as a superhero network, so they just up and canceled this show and Wonder Woman in one fell blow. Though the network did throw them a bone in allowing 2 TV movies to be made that were released the following year. Maybe I'll get to them one day. But is The Amazing Spider-Man a bad show? Well, it certainly isn't that good. Stan Lee called this version of Spider-Man a cardboard character, and I gotta agree with him. Given that this show aired on the same network at the same time period as Wonder Woman and The Incredible Hulk, it just feels like the other two put out more effort, especially with Linda Carter and Bill Bixby fully establishing the personality of their characters, making them as close to the comic originals as possible, while also putting their own spin on them that audiences could get behind. Nicholas Hammond here is just kind of bland, in addition to just seeming a bit too old for what you'd expect Peter Parker to be. It almost feels like this show tried to mix the up-tempo action of Wonder Woman with the slow melodrama The Incredible Hulk was known for, and the two just didn't mix well. I can't say I'm not surprised this version didn't make it into either Into the Spider-Verse or Spider-Man No Way Home, because this one is just completely forgetful. Buried among the other superhero shows at the time that just did a better job making more memorable characters. And believe me, that's really saying something. When Lou Ferrigno in green paint and sandals draws more memories than your version of Spider-Man, you have seriously failed. See you next time on TV Trash.